Hey everyone, welcome back to ABA 411. I'm your behavior analyst, John, and in this video, we're going to talk about the procedure that is extinction. And maybe we can start with why use extinction. Well, extinction is going to be extremely handy in incorporating into our treatment plan when we're working to diminish essentially till non-existence a behavior that we find to be a big problem. And so let me just maybe go into some of my own work history for the many individuals that I worked with that exhibited a lot of aggressive behaviors such as hitting, biting, kicking, pushing, object throwing, property destruction. Then I had to incorporate an extinction to basically get rid of those behaviors because for the most part, right, I, as well as the team that I would be a part of, would determine that there was no place for such behaviors like in the classroom or at home. And so we made the determination that really it's not an appropriate behavior to be exhibiting, right? And I think we can largely agree with those kind of behaviors. There really is no place for that. That's why we have specific laws that will punish for assaulting others or destroying their property. And so that's what we would target and deem perhaps inappropriate and therefore target for extinction. And so that's generally why we would be wanting to extinguish behaviors, is that they're one is that they probably pose a great safety concern for the individual or for those that work with the individual or live with them. And so we want to just make that behavior non-existent. And so how do we perform extinction? Well, extinction by definition is the complete withholding of the reinforcer for that behavior. And so you can pretty much apply that to any behavior too. Say if you yourself are trying to work in undoing a personal habit, such as that could be bad for you, such as maybe smoking or eating too much sugar, or if you're maybe not supposed to have any sugar, maybe refined sugar, then you would have to figure out a way to extinguish that, right? Which is just not being able to come into contact with that reinforcer. And oftentimes it is maybe exactly that itself, right? Like smoking is to perhaps get a particular sense of relief from stress or for some kind of nicotine high, right? Stimulation from the nicotine. And so lighting the cigarette, right, you need to extinguish that by not having, I mean, it's really tough and it can get complicated once you go down that particular road. But let me just stick to the point with when you withhold a reinforcer for a behavior, then that behavior starts to little by little demonstrate that it's no longer effective in accessing and coming in for that individual to come into contact with a desirable outcome or consequence. So therefore, the more they try the behavior and the more it demonstrates that it's not working in terms of getting that reinforcer, right, then the behavior is no longer useful. And the individual might have to switch to some other behavior that will do so, that will provide that desirable outcome. And so that's part of often a treatment plan goal, is to provide perhaps a replacement behavior that is more socially appropriate or more appropriate to the environment that that individual is residing in, working in, learning in, to still access that reinforcer, because perhaps that reinforcer is perfectly fine for them to have, but just not in the manner that they go about in getting it. So a lot of this sometimes shows with a lot of our nonverbal learners, individuals that are not able to physically speak and therefore communicate their needs and wants. They are unable to successfully do that for most people around them, to be able to verbally communicate their needs and wants. And so the frustration associated with that, and the impulse to just tantrum, to just get aggressive, to help themselves to those items, right, is great. And then if it's proven that those are the behaviors that work, that get them what they want, then they're probably going to stick with that until you come along and keep them from accessing those things, and then introduce to them that from perhaps a picture board, they are able to point to you what it is that they need and want, or to just use their fingers instead to point to you what it is that they need and want. So when you look at it that way, that as you're extinguishing the behavior by keeping the reinforcer away from the individual once the behavior is performed, right, you're undoing a learning history. But because perhaps the motivation to acquire that, or I should say come into contact with that reinforcer, is so great, then you really should try to introduce a replacement behavior so that they may be able to do that. And again, a lot of these reinforcers are perhaps acceptable for the individual to have. It may be a snack or some kind of preferred item that is within the environment. And if you continue to replenish supply of those snacks or items, then you must be in agreement that it is something that they could have, but no more of that, right? With or not, just not in that way. So this leads into sometimes what we may all have tried as perhaps parents or teachers sometime during our experience with working with the individual who exhibits these behaviors, is that we may have tried to withhold the reinforcer, right? Where we go, that's it, no more of this. You can tantrum all you want. You can break anything you want. You're not getting that thing, right? And so you could be running extinction, except what's going to happen almost invariably throughout extinction procedures is that the individual will become a little more desperate. So the levels of the behaviors will get turned up. The duration, the frequency, the magnitude of the behavior will start to go past where present levels have always shown them to be. So if a tantrum, for instance, is on average 10, 12 minutes, you're probably going to see a 15, 18-minute tantrum, maybe 20 minutes or more. And because you're not quite used to those new levels of the behavior, you are then at a sort of crossroads. You need to decide whether you're going to continue withholding that reinforcer, or you're going to give in and effectively reinforce the behavior. In fact, reinforce the new form of the behavior where it's more intense, more frequent, more longer. And that's often, I think, what many of us have tried, where that's it, no more of that. You can scream all you want, and then it gets louder. Or they try something else in the middle of that event, where instead of screaming, they just start breaking things, and you go, whoa, okay, that's it, no more of that. Like, and then you might even try including some kind of additional punishment, like with like holding on to them, restraining them even, and it gets more intense, more dramatic. Things are getting really out of control, and then somewhere along the way you might just go ahead and just give into it, and that's what we really want to avoid. So I think for the most part, most people really have a good understanding of what to do when you think that you're just done with the behavior and you don't want it to get any worse, but you have to really commit to that. So for it to be extinction, it has to really be a committed procedure. You have to continue to withhold it, weather the storm of the new form of the behavior where it gets more intense, longer, more often, until then it just basically goes downhill from there for the behavior. So when you're tracking this in terms of data, very often I would do this myself as I'm tracking the data on the behavior that I'm targeting for extinction. There's almost invariably this, there it is, and then I start extinction and you see the behavior just spike up. but then over a short period of time, right? Because that's all you can do. One of the great examples for this is when you put in money into a vending machine and you get really used to the vending machine producing something for you that you want after pushing the buttons on the item that you want, right? You come to expect that. Well, if one day then the vending machine doesn't give you what you want, because not even that the thing turns, the coils turn and drop the food, it just doesn't turn at all. So you might try again pushing the buttons and still nothing comes out, and then you might be shaking the vending machine and still nothing comes out. You might fly kick the vending machine and definitely nothing comes out. Eventually you reach a terminal point, you walk away. There's nothing more you can do. The machine busted, took your money, and you might have hurt your foot in the process. And then maybe even the next time, you're going to probably do a double take on whether you want to feed that vending machine another $1 or $2 to get the item that you want because of that previous experience. But yet you may still try it, and as you do it, and again, same thing repeats. You may not even go as far as fly kicking the vending machine that next time, but you may very well, especially if you have sort of that cognitive wherewithal, that you're just probably going to overall after that avoid the vending machine. You just don't even want to give it any of your money, and you're not interested in what it has to offer. Even if that third or fourth try it starts to work again and we'll give it to you, you've probably already just made that clear distinction. It's not going to work. But for you, right? So for all you know, somebody in the middle of the second and third try, or after that second try, came along and just popped whatever connectors back together so that it would work and spit out that item again. You wouldn't have known that, and so then you probably still would just choose to avoid it, because historically speaking, it never paid out. So hopefully this gives you some better understanding as to this very important procedure. It is something that I highly recommend for when dealing with very significant socially inappropriate or just overall inappropriate behaviors. Very significant, right? Safety concerns are present, but you do have to think about how else to functionally meet that behavior with perhaps a replacement behavior, meaning how else can they access that reinforcer, right, that meets the function of that first behavior with a new behavior that's more appropriate for the environment, for the individual to perform, and transfer that, right? Essentially, you're shifting over reinforcement to that new behavior. So more on that when we're talking about differential reinforcement, schedules of reinforcement, and we're going to go ahead and probably cover that into our next video. So thanks for joining me here on Extinction, and if you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. If you feel like you enjoyed this video, hit like, share them with people that you feel could benefit from the information, and I'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.